Timberwolves. One of those veterans is defensive ace Patrick Beverley, and according to Bleacher Report, the Los Angeles Lakers and Miami Heat are both interested if Utah decides to flip him for more assets. The Lakers have badly needed defense ever since they let Alex Caruso sign with the Chicago Bulls, but beyond that, Beverley would be one of the better shooters on their entire roster after they devoted most of their free agent resources to athleticism. He would fit like a glove as a low-usage point guard on a LeBron James team, and after spending several years in Los Angeles with the Clippers, he'd likely be eager to return to his old stomping grounds. Miami lost a key defender in P.J. Tucker this offseason to the Philadelphia 76ers. Beverley may be a guard, but he can defend almost anybody on the positional spectrum. Miami would likely feel comfortable throwing him at almost any top opposing scorer, and his gritty attitude would fit in perfectly with the Heat's famously militaristic culture. The Heat had Beverley as a youngster in 2009, but cut him before the season. Beverley would fit on almost any contending roster. There simply aren't enough perimeter players in basketball that can shoot and defend at a high enough level to survive in the playoffs. Beverley has proven that he can. That is going to make him a hot commodity on the trade market whenever Utah decides to move him. Patrick Beverley was sent to Utah in the Rudy Gobert trade earlier this summer after a year in Minnesota. Even though it was a short spell for the 34-year-old point guard with the Timberwolves, he was an important player on the team and seemed to enjoy it. When asked if he was surprised to learn that Minnesota is trading him to the Jazz, Pat Bev said he was not because it is business and he understands that. Surprised? No, not in this business, Beverley said, per Mark Berman. Understood it. Never personal, always business. We did some great things in Minnesota. We kind of revamped the environment there. Gave the fans something to be happy about. Beverley sent a couple of messages since joining Utah. First, he promised to take the Jazz to the playoffs, something he has done every year since entering the NBA 10 years ago. Then when the Donovan Mitchell trade rumors became loud, Beverley publicly asked the team if they intend to tank or not, and that if so, he intends to leave. They've clung to Horton Tucker, specifically, for years despite getting little production out of him. There were rumors of a possible Kyle Lowry deal at the 2021 deadline, but the Lakers ultimately decided that they were unwilling to surrender their young guard. He has remained on the roster since despite his poor fit with Westbrook. Further complicating matters is that Horton Tucker is one of the very few ways the Lakers have of adding salary in a trade. Aside from Westbrook, LeBron James and Anthony Davis, the Lakers have just 3 players making more than the minimum. Lonnie Walker IV is not tradable until December. Kendrick Nunn's $5 million salary won't fetch much, but Horton Tucker, at $10.3 million, could bring in a contributor like Beverley. But the Lakers disagree. If they are scared of Beverley's injury history and age, that's reasonable. But sooner or later,
the Kyrie Irving trade saga has dragged on for weeks with several plot twists taking place in the meantime. Still, the prevailing notion has been that Irving will join the Los Angeles Lakers, if not this summer, then in 2023 when he hits free agency. But do the Lakers have the money to sign the playmaker next year if they don't acquire him through a trade with the Brooklyn Nets? With Russell Westbrook's gigantic $47.1 million salary coming off the books, LA's payroll will likely get significantly lighter next summer. As of now, only Anthony Davis, Max Christie, Talen Horton-Tucker and Damian Jones are under contract for 2023-24, with the latter two having a player option for the season. LeBron James doesn't seem in a rush to sign the 2-year, $97 million contract extension, which he will become eligible to ink on August 4. But the very first reports that suggested Irving could move to LA next summer also claimed he would do so to reunite with James, in addition to donning the same jersey the late Kobe Bryant once wore. Hence, any scenario in which the Lakers get Irving in the 2023 offseason needs to assume LeBron has extended his stay with the Purple and Gold. most likely on a 2-year deal with a player option for the following season, so the four-time NBA champion can stay in control of his future when his son Bronny becomes draft eligible. Dismissing any unlikely incentives, that brings the Lakers' payroll up to about $102 million with James, Davis, Christie, Horton Tucker and Jones on the roster, presuming the latter two picked up their player options, and some $30.8 million under the projected 2023-24 salary cap of $133 million. However, the Lakers wouldn't be able to spend all that money on Irving. Teams with fewer than 12 players under contract are subject to an incomplete roster charge, which should amount to about $1.1 million per unused roster spot next year. Moreover, Austin Reeves and Scottie Pippen Jr. will become restricted free agents in 2023, unless the Lakers decide not to extend their qualifying offers and let them hit free agency without any restrictions. However, it's hard to imagine LA giving up on Reeves after his impressive rookie season, while Pippen's qualifying offer won't be much higher than an incomplete roster charge. Adding all those extra expenses in, the Lakers could potentially pay Irving close to $22 million in 2023-24 and around $92 million in total over a 4-year deal, providing that Reeves doesn't receive an offer from another team that LA would have to match. Next summer, Irving will be able to sign a 4-year, $200 million max contract with anyone, and a considerably higher one if he returns to Brooklyn. However, NBA teams, including the Nets, are reportedly unwilling to offer the max to the eccentric guard. Still, could Irving sacrifice over $100 million, half the money he's eligible for, to reunite with James in LA? That's, well, a $100 million question. A few reports did indicate Irving wanted to join the Lakers so badly he could have even opted out of his contract with the Nets and signed with the Purple and Gold using the $6.5 million taxpayer mid-level exception this summer. However, those hopes were quickly thwarted, as the guard picked up his $36.5 million player option days before the deadline on June 29. The caveat here is that the above calculations assume Westbrook stays with the Lakers for another year. Meanwhile, more and more teams are being linked with a move for the 33-year-old's expiring salary, most notably the Indiana Pacers. But in any deal, trading Westbrook away without taking on more long-term salary seems improbable, and so parting ways with the 2017 NBA MVP would likely further reduce the cap space available for a potential Irving signing next summer. The trade with the Pacers would reportedly bring in Miles Turner and Buddy Hield in exchange for Westbrook and draft assets. While Turner's contract expires next year, Hield still has over $40 million left on his deal over the next 2 seasons, virtually taking up the Lakers' remaining 2023-2024 cap space if his addition is the only change made to the assumed payroll breakdown. Without cap space, the Purple and Gold again could only offer Irving mid-level exception money, which could exceed $11 million in the first year of the deal if they can stay below the luxury tax line. Whether Westbrook gets traded or not, LeBron could aid the Lakers' pursuit of Irving by following James Harden's lead and taking a significant pay cut when he signs his extension, increasing LA's free agency budget. The Purple and Gold could also trade Horton Tucker for an expiring contract, freeing $11 million in cap space, or try any other roster charades if they acquire other players, like Hield, between now and the 2023 offseason. An example of this is the New York Knicks this summer, as they attached draft capital to Kemba Walker to trade him to the Detroit Pistons in exchange for future draft picks, not taking back any current salary in return. They then did the same with Alec Burks and Nerlens Noel, trading them to the Pistons, which opened up more cap space to ultimately sign Jalen Brunson to a 4-year, $104 million contract in free agency. The Lakers could follow a similar path next summer if they have a Hoops Hype's Michael Scotto and Celtics beat writer Jared Weiss share the latest updates on trade talks between the Celtics and Nets surrounding Jaylen Brown and Kevin Durant. Plus, the possibility of Marcus Smart and Grant Williams being involved in the trade talks, what's next for Kyrie Irving's future, and more on the latest edition of the Hoops Hype podcast. For more interviews with players, coaches, and media members, be sure to like and subscribe to the Hoops Hype podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and anywhere else you listen to podcasts. Listen to the podcast above or check out some snippets of the conversation in a transcribed version below. Brooklyn wanted a package that could top the Rudy Gobert package that Utah got for him in the trade with Minnesota. To this point, that market has not materialized. There are some younger guys they'd be open to getting if they were going to move Kevin Durant. Scotty Barnes with Toronto, who has not been put on the table yet. You wondered if Brandon Ingram of the Pelicans could be a guy that's put on the table? To this point, I've heard he's not been put on the table. I also didn't see Durant necessarily wanting to go to New Orleans as well. Jaylen Brown would represent, in my opinion, as of now, the best individual player that they could potentially get back for Kevin Durant. Brown could be an all-star player for the next 7 years. From Boston's perspective, Derek White is expendable following the trade to acquire Malcolm Brogdon. Nets general manager Sean Marks has long been a fan of Marcus Smart from afar, according to league sources. I'd also say Grant Williams and Peyton Pritchard would appeal more from their salaries compared to White and given their ages and upside. Ime Udoka also enjoyed coaching Durant in Brooklyn during their time together. Weiss. They're willing to replace Jaylen with Durant. They're willing to risk the short-term age and injury risk to eschew a player who's been consistently very good, has continued to improve, and was an all-star 2 years ago. They're willing to throw that away in order to get one of the best players in the game right now. KD has not been available a lot the past few years. He was incredible in the playoffs 2 years ago and the regular season last year. If you're trading for KD, you're trading for him to put you over the top of the playoffs and make you the juggernaut of the league. The Celtics are in a spot where they're quite not a juggernaut, but they just made the finals, and they added 2 huge pieces,